Well, hello, friends. I hope you're having a great day today. Hey, when you get your faith to go out the door today, you better grab a coat also because it is cold outside. I'm telling you, we went straight from like summer to a touch of fall into some wintertime weather, but hey, that's the way it is here in South Alabama. Hey, it's hump day. It's Wednesday. God's blessed us and kept us and been so good to us. And I just believe He's going to do that the rest of the week. Welcome to another edition of Take 5. Hey, before we get into this today, let me remind you one more time, and I'll probably do this every day for a while. Please keep Pastor Judd Sessions and his family and his church, Foley First Assembly of God. Please keep them in your prayers in the days to come. Brother Sessions was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer that has already metastasized and spread to his spine and to his brain. So please keep them in your prayers. Pray that God will do a great work in his life. We're just believing God for a miracle because our God is a miracle worker. So keep him in your prayers and his family and his church in the days to come. Now, hey, you know what we're talking about this week? We're dealing with that thought, the process of neglect. And we pretty well learned that neglect is a powerful thing. It's a deadly thing, and it's something that just about every person that I know, ourself included, deals with from time to time. Neglect is this process of events that leads to the subsequent ruin of anything in which it is allowed to exist. If you allow neglect to exist, it will lead to the ruin of anything, whether it be health, relationships, your pets, your automobile, or your spiritual health. If you let neglect exist, it will lead to the ruin of your life or whatever the thing is. Spiritual negligence is an issue that's ruined many who were once faithful followers of Jesus Christ. Now, yesterday, we began to talk about the crisis of spiritual neglect. We read a couple of verses there. We're not going to take the time to do it today. But we did see that if the owner of the property refused to give the attention necessary to the problem at hand, it's only going to get worse. Same with us. If we don't deal with these things when they show up, they're just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. So we have to honestly appraise our spiritual condition if we're going to find out and determine that we have become neglectful concerning the things of God. 2 different occasions, Paul said we need to examine ourselves, to take a look at ourselves and properly appraise what's going on in our life. And so there are people that saw these things pop up in their life, but they didn't address them. And because you didn't address those issues, they'll grow and grow and grow until your life is consumed with them. On the other hand, there are some people that notice these things and they choose to neglect them because they say that God's grace is enough to cover these things and they don't need to be addressed. Well, what they're saying is partially true. God's grace is amazing, and it is absolutely more than enough for any and all sin. The only problem is that we cannot expect to get the benefits of grace if we refuse to obey the demands of grace. Make sure you hear that. We cannot expect to get the benefits of grace if we refuse to obey the demands of grace. Grace is the supernatural favor that God initially gives without demand. Absolutely nothing at all. We can't buy grace. We can't earn it. God gives it without demand. But once we receive God's grace, there are subsequent demands that grace makes on our life. Titus chapter 2 tells us this. It says, the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. Watch this. It teaches us to say no. That's the demands that grace brings with it. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. Again, I say you can't buy grace. You can't earn grace. There's nothing you can do to demand it. But once God gives His grace, it brings a demand with it, and that is we must say no to sin. We must root it out and not be negligent of dealing with it. If you're needing another example of that, all you have to do is look to John's Gospel chapter 8 And you'll find a story there of a woman that was the Pharisees brought to Jesus, and they said, we caught her in the very act of adultery. Now they went on to say, Moses' law tells us that she ought to be stoned. We want to know what you say. They were trying to trap him with his words there. And so Jesus just squatted down like he was ignoring them, and he just doodled on the ground right there. And eventually he stood up and said, I tell you what, whichever one of you is without sin, you cast the first stone. And he squatted back down and he doodled on the ground. Well, you know what? None of them can throw stones. And so they immediately all left. Well, after they left, Jesus stood up and he asked the lady, he said, woman, where are your accusers? She said, there's no one here. Watch here. Here's the grace. And he said, neither do I condemn you. That's the grace that you cannot buy, that you cannot earn, that you cannot merit. But watch the demand that comes after the grace. Now go and sin no more. Did you catch that? She couldn't earn that grace. But once that grace came, there was a demand that it brought with it, and that was go and sin no more. So please don't think that grace is a get out of jail free card that allows us to neglect sin in our life. If you neglect it, it will grow up and it will overrun your life and take you from ruin to decay to destruction faster than you could ever think that it could. It's a mockery of grace to think that it doesn't have a demand with it. So please, when you see these things in your life, don't just lay them aside and say, oh, that's God's grace covers that. I don't have to deal with it. His grace may cover that, but He expects for you to deal with it because His grace teaches us to say no. Hey, don't neglect these things in your life, friend. They will grow up and they will turn a small thing into a big mess in your life before you know it. Well, hey, I got to get out of here. It's been good being with you today. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Thursday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you and have a great and godly day.